She carries the dead. Every wolf who ever died on this territory lives in her bones. Their last moments, their last breath, their last sight. She crossed into Ashenmore territory 3 days ago. Within 1 hour, she knew the name of every wolf the Alpha had ever ordered killed. Within 2 hours, she knew how they died. Within 3 hours, the bond activated. She has 21 days before the convergence finds her. She does not know if she will survive what she already knows. Chapter 1. The Weight of Ashenmore. She felt them the moment she crossed the boundary stone. 7 voices. Not sound, nothing as clean as sound. Impressions, bone deep, arriving in the specific layered way of the recently dead. The oldest first, then the newer ones, then the newest of all, still raw and close to the surface of the territory's memory. 7 wolves who had died on Ashenmore land in the last 4 years, and whose last moments now lived in her the way all the territory dead lived in her. Completely, permanently, without her permission. Her name was Mara Voss, and she had been carrying the dead since she was 19 years old, when her ability had arrived in the night like a tide she hadn't known was coming and had never fully receded. She stopped at the boundary stone and breathed through it, the way her mother had taught her, before her mother died and became the first voice Mara had ever carried. Slow breath in, let the impressions settle. Don't fight them. Fighting made them louder. Receive them. File them. Let them become part of the landscape rather than the foreground. 7 wolves. She filed them one by one, the way a physician files a diagnosis. Present, acknowledged, not yet acted upon. The oldest was 4 years ago, a border patrol wolf, young, killed in a territorial dispute that the land remembered as confusion more than violence. A mistake. The next 3 were 2 years ago, closer together, harder deaths, purposeful, the kind that carried intent rather than accident. Then 1 18 months ago. Then 2, together, 6 months back. The 2 from 6 months ago were the ones that sat differently. She didn't examine why yet. She picked up her bag and walked across the boundary stone into Ashenmore territory and kept her face arranged in the expression of someone who was passing through. She was not passing through. She was running. The convergence had been building for 3 weeks. She could feel it the same way she felt the territorial dead, as a pressure, a gathering, the specific sensation of many things moving toward a single point, her point. In 21 days, every pack within 500 miles would feel the pull of the old bloodline she carried and arrive at wherever she was standing, drawn by an instinct none of them would fully understand. She needed to be somewhere with walls and an alpha when that happened. Somewhere that could manage 400 wolves arriving at once without it becoming a war. Ashenmore was the largest territory in the north. Its alpha, by reputation, was the most capable in 3 generations. She had chosen it before she felt the dead. Now she walked its roads and carried its 7 voices, and told herself this was still the right choice. The estate was exactly what old pack money looked like when it had been used well. Stone that had earned its age, windows that had light in them at 9 in the morning because people inside were already working. She had a letter from a neutral pack arbiter requesting hospitality for a traveling wolf scholar. It was true enough. She was a scholar. She traveled. She studied the dead. She did not put that last part in the letter. The gate wolf checked her documentation and sent a runner ahead. She waited in the cold morning air and breathed through the 7 voices and kept her face arranged. Then the alpha came to the gate himself. She had not expected that. Alphas sent people. They received visitors in council rooms with the architecture of authority arranged around them. They did not come to the gate in the early morning with a coat pulled against the cold, and their hands free, and their face doing what his face was doing, which was, she read it in the first second, the way she read everything, careful, contained. The expression of someone who had received information that required him to assess it personally. He was tall, dark complexion, Dark, close-cut hair, strong jaw, eyes the specific gray-green of deep forest water. He moved with the ease of someone completely at home in his own territory, which was its own kind of authority, not performed, simply present. He looked at her. The bond activated. She had been warned about this. Not the bond specifically. She had not known the bond was coming, but she had been warned by every wolf she'd ever met who understood her ability that the worst possible thing that could happen to a wolf who carried the dead was to bond to the alpha whose decisions had put them there. She understood in the space of one breath that the worst possible thing had happened. She understood in the space of the next breath that he had no idea. He extended his hand in the standard pack greeting, the offer of formal contact, and she looked at his hand and thought, if I take it, I will feel everything he has ever done on this territory. Every decision that touched the land, every death he ordered or permitted or was too late to prevent. She looked up at his face. He was watching her with those gray-green eyes and the careful expression, and he was waiting. And he did not yet know that the woman at his gate was carrying 7 of his dead and had just been bonded to him by something that had not asked either of their opinions. Mara Voss, she said, thank you for receiving me. She took his hand. It hit her like a wave. Not the 7 voices. She already had those. What came through his touch was the context, the decisions, the full architecture of 17 years of leading Ashenmore, compressed and flooding in through the contact point, too much to fully process but enough to establish the shape. A man who had made hard choices in hard territory, who had lost wolves and mourned them, who had ordered things he had not ordered lightly, and underneath all of it, recent and specific and sitting differently from everything else, the 2 deaths from 6 months ago. She dropped his hand. She made sure her face showed nothing. I'm grateful for the hospitality, she said. I won't take more of your time than I need. You're welcome here as long as you need, he said. His voice was even. He was still watching her with the careful attention of someone who had felt the bond activate and was choosing not to name it yet. She nodded. She walked through the gate. She had 21 days and a secret that could destroy everything, and a bond she had not asked for with the man she had come here needing to trust. She walked through the gate and did not look back. Chapter 2. What she knew. His name was Cassian Vielle, and he had been Alpha of Ashenmore for 17 years. She knew this from the letter her arbiter contact had sent with the hospitality request. She knew the rest from his land, the long accumulated voice of a territory that had been held and protected and occasionally bled for by one hand. She sat in the guest room they'd given her and let the dead settle and tried to be fair. This was what she always had to do, had learned to do painstakingly over years of carrying voices that arrived without context and demanded to be heard. The dead were not neutral reporters. They carried their own perspectives, their own griefs, their own particular distortions of the moment of dying. The woman who died in a fire remembered the smoke first. The man who died in a fight remembered the specific face of the one who ended it, enlarged and certain, while the cause of the fight had already faded. The 2 from 6 months ago. She let herself feel them carefully. 2 young wolves. Brothers, she thought. The specific frequency of them was similar, pack bonded in a way that ran deeper than pack membership. They had died together, which was its own particular weight. Their last moments were cold, dark, running, and then a sound they'd recognized and turned toward, and then nothing. The sound they'd recognized was a voice, an order. Not Cassian's voice, not his specifically, but coming from his direction in the organizational sense. Authorized, his authority behind it even if his voice wasn't the last thing they heard. She sat with this for a long time. Authorized did not mean ordered. Ordered did not mean intended. Intended did not mean the full weight of a man's character. She had carried enough dead to know that the worst moments of a person's leadership were not the full picture of who they were, the same way the worst moment of anyone's life was not the whole of their life. She also knew that carrying the dead obligated her to something. She had decided this when she was 23 and had begun to understand that her ability was not a passive condition, but a responsibility. The dead did not ask to be felt. They had not consented to living in her bones. The least she could do was take their testimony seriously. She would need to know more before she could conclude anything. She was still working through this when someone knocked. It was not Cassian. It was a wolf named Seren, his head of household, she'd been told, which was the kind of title that in practice meant the person who actually ran everything and received no formal credit for it. Seren was somewhere in her 50s, gray-streaked hair, the specific watchful competence of someone who had kept a large and complicated establishment running for decades through pure applied intelligence. "The Alpha asks if you'll join him for dinner," Seren said. "He says no obligation. He also says, if you need anything in the meantime, to ask me rather than him, because I'm more useful." The last part was said with the flatness of a direct quote from someone who had made a private joke that Seren had decided to deliver anyway. Mara felt the corner of her mouth move. "Tell him yes," she said, "and thank him for the qualification." Seren's eyes held the particular warmth of someone who had just received confirmation of a theory. "I'll tell him," she said. The dinner was in a small room off the main kitchen, not the formal dining hall, which told her something. He had made a choice about what kind of dinner this was going to be. The table was set for two, which told her the rest. He was already there when she arrived. He stood when she entered, which was the pack custom, and also, she thought, specific to him, the gesture too natural to be performed. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for asking," she said, "and for the qualification through Seren." Something moved in his expression. "Seren delivered that exactly," he said. "She did. I'm moderately horrified," he said. "You shouldn't be," Mara said. "It was the right thing to say." She sat down. He sat across from her. "Can I ask you something directly?" "Yes," he said. "You came to the gate yourself this morning," she said. "Alphas don't usually do that." He looked at her steadily. "I felt something when your request arrived," he said. "I wanted to assess it directly." "The bond," she said. A pause. "Yes," he said. "You felt it when I crossed the boundary," she said. "Yes," he said again. "I assume you felt it too." "When I took your hand," she said. He held her gaze. "You didn't want to take my hand," he said. It was an observation, not a question. The careful attention of someone who had noticed and was choosing to acknowledge it rather than manage it. "No," she said honestly. "Can I ask why?" She looked at him across the dinner table and thought, "Because I was about to find out what you've done, and I needed a moment before I found it out." "My ability," she said, "contact is complicated. I needed to prepare." "What is your ability?" he said. She had a version of this she gave to most people, carefully edited, minimal, enough to explain the gloves she usually wore without creating the specific alarm that the full truth produced. She looked at him and understood that the edited version was not going to be sufficient for what the next 21 days required. "I carry the dead," she said. "Every wolf who has ever died on a territory I enter, I receive their last impressions, their last moments. They don't leave. They become part of how I experience the land." The silence that followed was the specific silence of someone processing something that had no category in their existing framework. "Every wolf," he said. "Who died on the territory," she confirmed. "Yes." He looked at the table, then back at her. "Then you know," he said. Not a complete sentence, not a question. Just the specific weight of a man who had led a territory for 17 years and understood immediately what that ability would mean for anyone who had ever made a hard decision on that land. "I know some things," she said carefully. "I'm still understanding others." "How many?" he said. "7," she said, "in the last 4 years." He was very still. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Yeah," she said. "I think you do." Chapter 3. What he told her. He told her about the two brothers. He told her without being asked to, without being pressured, with the specific directness of someone who had been carrying a decision for 6 months and understood that the person across from him already knew enough that anything less than the full truth was an insult to both of them. Their names were Devan and Ryle. They had been border scouts, young, capable, working the eastern edge of Ashenmoor where the Caro territory boundary ran close, and the historical disputes were old and complicated. 6 months ago, there had been intelligence, credible intelligence, from 3 separate sources, that Kara was moving an operation through the eastern border. Weapons, possibly. Resources for a challenge against Ashenmore that had been building for 2 years. He had authorized an interception. The interception team had made a mistake in identification. Devon and Ryle had not been Caro operatives. He found out 4 days later. He had spent the 6 months since in the specific internal accounting of a leader who had given an order that killed 2 of his own wolves through a failure he could trace back to the intelligence, to the identification error, to the urgency, and ultimately to the authorization he had signed. "I've been in contact with their family every week since," he said. "I've accepted full accountability with the pack. I haven't—" He stopped. "There is no accounting that brings them back." Mara sat with this. She sat with it the way she sat with all the difficult things the dead gave her. Fully, without flinching, with the respect of someone who understood that not flinching was not the same as not feeling. "Tell me about the intelligence failure," she said. He looked at her. "You want the operational details?" he said. "I want to understand whether the decision was reasonably made or recklessly made," she said. "There's a difference. I'm not a counsel. I'm not going to render judgment, but I'm carrying your dead and the bond activated, and I have 21 days before something much larger than either of us arrives at your gate, and I need to understand who you are." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he told her the operational details. She listened. She asked 3 questions. He answered them completely. She listened to the answers and cross-referenced them against what she felt in the 2 brothers. The cold and the dark, and the voice they'd recognized, the specific way the last moments of someone who died by mistake differed from the last moments of someone who died in war. Mistake deaths had a particular quality, the surprise of it, the incompleteness, the body's refusal to fully accept what was happening because it hadn't prepared. Devon and Ryle had died in surprise. What she did not feel in them was the sensation that preceded deaths ordered by someone who wanted them dead. She had felt that in her years of work, the specific atmosphere of a targeted death, the way the land held it differently. She did not feel that in these 2. She felt a mistake, a catastrophic, irreversible, 6-month-old mistake made by a man who had been working with imperfect information under genuine threat and had lived with the full weight of it since. "The intelligence failure was at the source level," she said, "not your assessment." He looked at her. "You can feel that," he said. "I can feel the quality of the death," she said. "I've been doing this for 9 years. I know the difference between a mistake and an intention." He was quiet for a long time. "That doesn't make them less dead," he said. "No," she said. "It doesn't. Nothing does. But it changes what kind of accounting is owed." The dinner had gone cold. Neither of them had eaten. "The convergence," he said. "Tell me what it is." She told him about the old bloodline, the gathering instinct it triggered, the 21 days. He listened the way he had listened to her questions, completely, without managing his reactions, with the full attention of someone who understood that information was more useful received than deflected. 400 wolves, he said, arriving here. Approximately. The pull is strong. Most will come. She paused. I've been running from it for 3 years, moving before any territory could fully index my location. This time I ran out of places that were large enough to absorb the convergence safely. Why Ashenmore? He said. She looked at him. Because its alpha has the reputation of someone who can manage the unmanageable, she said. And because I needed somewhere with walls. He held her gaze. You came here knowing about the dead, he said. You came here anyway. I came here because the dead told me something else too, she said. They told me the shape of 17 years of decisions, not just the worst 6 months of them. He was very still. What did they tell you? He said. That you are a man who loses sleep over the things he gets wrong, she said. That's not nothing. Chapter 4. The 18 Days. She stayed. She had intended to stay regardless. The convergence did not care about her comfort, but she had not known when she arrived whether staying would be endurable. She knew now that endurable was not the right word for what staying was. They worked together, not immediately, not easily, not without the specific gravity of what she carried and what he knew she carried, but with the particular pragmatism of two people who had both spent years doing difficult things and had developed, separately, the same understanding, that the difficult things still needed doing, regardless of how it felt. She mapped the convergence, what it would look like when 400 wolves arrived, driven by an instinct they didn't understand, how the territory would need to receive them, what the pack structure would have to do to manage the influx. She had notes from 3 previous convergences she'd watched from a safe distance, never the center of one, always running before she became it. He listened to the notes and rebuilt Ashenmore's protocols around them with the systematic efficiency of someone who had been managing complex territorial logistics for 17 years. He pulled his 6 senior lieutenants in on day 3. She watched him brief them, watched the way he gave information, and received pushback and revised his thinking in real time. The specific quality of a leader who had learned that he was not the smartest person in every room and had stopped needing to be. She gave him back some of the dead. Not literally. She could not transfer what she carried. The ability was hers alone. The voices stayed with her. But she could tell him what she knew, and she did carefully. The way a physician gave a diagnosis. Completely, with context, with the full weight of what it meant, and without softening the parts that were hard. The older wolves first. The border patrol death. The young wolf who had died in a territorial dispute that his land remembered as confusion. She told him the name. She told him what she felt of the last moments. She watched his face absorb it and hold it. He was 22, Cassian said. I didn't know him as well as I should have. He died not knowing why, she said. I want you to know that. The not knowing was part of the weight. If there's anything his family doesn't know, tell them. I will, he said. The days built on each other. She told him about the dead and he received them, and she watched what he did with what she gave him. The calls he made, the visits, the specific care of a man repaying debts that could not be fully repaid, but could be honored. She watched him sit with Devon and Ryle's mother for 2 hours on day 8. She did not listen. She stood outside the room and felt the territory, and let herself understand that the man inside was not the man she had feared when she crossed the boundary stone. He was something harder to account for. The bond between them was a constant presence. Not overwhelming, not demanding, but there. The way weather was there. She was aware of where he was in the estate with the specific attention of the bond layer. She was aware of when he was troubled and when he wasn't. She was aware of the precise moment on day 11 when she stopped experiencing this as a complication and started experiencing it as simply true. She was sitting in the East Library on day 12 when he came in and sat across from her without asking, which was how he had started doing things after day 5, and said, "Tell me about carrying them, what it costs." She looked up from the convergence maps. "Nobody asked that," she said. "I'm asking," he said. She set down her pen. "It's loud," she said. "When I first enter a territory, the first hour is the loudest. All the impressions arriving at once, layering, finding their places. It's like standing in a river." She paused. "After that, it settles. They become part of the landscape. I'm aware of them the way you're aware of a scar. Not constantly, but when something touches that place." "Does it hurt?" he said. "Not pain," she said. "Weight. The older ones are lighter. The newer ones..." She stopped. "The ones that were violent are heavier. The ones that were unexpected." "Devon and Ryle," he said. "Yes," she said. "They're the heaviest ones here." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said, "that you carry them." She looked at him. "Don't be," she said. "I'd rather carry them than have nobody carry them." He held her gaze. "That's either the saddest thing I've heard or the most generous," he said. "It's just true," she said. He reached across the table, not to take her hand. He had learned early about what contact meant for her and had never once reached for her without asking. He put his hand on the table between them, palm up, offering. "Can I?" he said. She looked at his hand. She had not chosen contact since arriving. She had been careful, deliberately, because she already had the weight of his territory, and adding more was a risk she'd been managing. But she looked at his hand and thought about the 14 days they had spent in the particular honesty of people working together towards something that mattered. And she thought about the weight of carrying things alone, and she put her hand in his. What she received was not what she'd feared. His grief. Recent, specific, still raw, Devon and Ryle, and beneath them, the 6 months of accountability, the visits to the family, the sleepless nights she'd inferred and now felt the edges of. His concern for the convergence, which was present and real but underneath it, something else. A different kind of attention, directed at her specifically, that she recognized with the specific clarity of someone who had spent 9 years reading what the dead left behind and had learned to recognize the quality of care when it was real. She also received something she hadn't expected. Relief, his, at having told her the truth, at having been received honestly rather than managed. The specific quality of relief that a person felt when they'd been carrying something alone and had finally put it down in front of someone else, and the other person had not run. She withdrew her hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he said. "For asking," she said. "Before." He looked at her. "Always," he said. Chapter 5. Day 19. The first wolves arrived 2 days early. She felt them before the gate scouts reported it, the pull of the old blood drawing them in from the south. 4 wolves she didn't know, moving with the specific, urgent purposefulness of something driven by instinct rather than decision. She was in the operations room with Cassian and his lieutenants when she felt them and said, quietly, 2 days early, southern approach, 4 wolves. Cassian looked at her and then at his gate lieutenant without asking how she knew. The gate lieutenant was already moving. This was how the last 9 days had worked. Her ability providing the early warning system that no amount of perimeter scouts could replicate, and Cassian's operational infrastructure turning that warning into response before the situation could become a crisis. They had not discussed this arrangement formally. It had emerged from the logic of the situation and the specific quality of 2 people who trusted each other enough to act on each other's information. Trust. She had noted when it arrived and hadn't named it until day 16, when she'd caught herself, in the East Library, telling him something about her ability that she had never told anyone and had not planned to tell him, and had understood that the decision had been made below the level of conscious planning. The 4 wolves were received at the gate, disoriented and vaguely embarrassed by their own arrival, the way wolves caught by the convergence pull always were. They had not fully understood why they were here, only that here was where they needed to be. Cassian's team received them with the specific, practiced hospitality of people who had been briefed. No alarm, no interrogation, just welcome and orientation and a meal. By evening, 3 more had arrived. By the following morning, the pace had accelerated. She stood at the upper window of the estate on day 20 and watched the territory receive them. Wolves arriving in 1s and 2s in small groups, drawn by something they couldn't name, received by a pack that had spent 19 days preparing. Cassian was at the gate for most of it, which she had stopped being surprised by. He was that kind of alpha. She came down at noon. He was talking to a group of 6 newly arrived wolves, some of them as young as 17, all of them slightly dazed. He was doing what she had watched him do for 19 days, being completely present with whoever was in front of him, speaking directly, receiving their confusion without managing it, giving them enough to orient by without overwhelming. He looked up when she appeared. Something in his expression shifted. The specific warmth that had been appearing more frequently over the last week, that she had stopped pretending not to notice. He excused himself from the group and crossed to her. 83 so far, he said. Saren thinks we'll peak at somewhere between 300 and 400 by tomorrow evening. That aligns with what I felt, she said. It'll build through tonight. He looked at her. How are you? He said. Not operationally, personally. Loud, she said. All the new arrivals, their territories come with them. I have a lot of new voices. Is there anything? No, she said. I'm all right. I've done this before, just never at the center. She paused. It's different at the center. Different how? She looked at the courtyard full of wolves who had been pulled here by her bloodline, who were confused and a little frightened, and being received by 400 Ashenmoor wolves with quiet, practiced competence. Less terrible than I expected, she said. He looked at the courtyard too. We've been preparing for 20 days, he said. We were ready. You were ready, she said. I gave you information. You built the response. We, he said, firm, direct. She looked at him. We, she agreed. Chapter 6. What the Convergence Asks. The peak arrived on day 21 at dusk. 367 wolves. The old blood convergence, in the records Mara had found over years of studying her own ability, was described as a reckoning. The bloodline calling its witnesses, the territory acknowledging the line. She had always understood this academically. She had not understood what it felt like from the inside. It felt like standing in the center of a tide, all of them feeling the pull toward her, all of them oriented around her presence, and underneath that orientation, the deep pack instinct that the old bloodline had always triggered. This is something worth protecting. Not because she was weak, the old blood had never been about weakness, because she was rare, because what she carried was rare, because the ability to hold the dead, to testify for them, to ensure that what happened on Packland was not lost to convenience or silence, was the kind of thing that packs had once understood was worth guarding. She stood in the center of the Ashenmoor courtyard at dusk and let herself be seen. This was what the convergence required. Not performance, not display, just presence. She had to be there, fully, with the ability operating at full capacity, so that every wolf present could feel what she was and understand why the instinct had brought them here. Cassian stood beside her. He had not been asked to. He had simply been there when the convergence peaked, standing at her left, close enough that she could feel him in the bond layer. And she had looked at him, and he had looked back, and neither of them had said anything because nothing needed to be said. The 367 wolves felt the bond between them. She felt them feel it, the collective recognition, the specific frequency of a pack registering an alpha bond in the context of the old blood convergence. She felt the moment it settled. This territory, this alpha, this bond. The convergence was not just about her bloodline. It was about what the bloodline had found. It lasted 4 hours. By full dark, the pull had eased, still present, still drawing the gathered wolves toward her location, but no longer the urgent driving force of the peak. Wolves began the specific process of the post-convergence, disoriented, gradually grounding, processing what had happened with the slightly dazed quality of someone waking from a vivid dream. She sat down on the courtyard steps. Cassian sat beside her. "Are you all right?" he said. "Extraordinarily loud," she said. 367 new territories. "How long does it take to settle?" "Days," she said. "Maybe a week. It gets quieter incrementally." She looked at the courtyard, at the wolves who were slowly beginning to move, to speak to each other, to eat the food that Saren's kitchen had been producing in industrial quantities for 3 days. "You fed all of them." "Saren fed all of them," he said. "I just agreed with everything she proposed." "That's good leadership," she said. "It's mostly self-preservation," he said. "Saren, when disagreed with, is not a situation I seek out." She laughed. It surprised her. Not the laugh itself, but the ease of it, the way it arrived without being summoned. He was looking at her with the gray-green eyes and the expression that had been building for 20 days and had arrived, tonight, at something she could no longer pretend not to recognize. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Ask," she said. "The dead," he said. "They don't leave," you said. "They stay." "Yes." "Devon and Ryle," he said. "They're still there." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "I don't want you to carry them because of me," he said. "If there's anything I can do, any accounting, any—" "Cassian," she said. He stopped. "I've been carrying the dead for 9 years," she said. "I don't choose who I carry everyone. Devon and Ryle would be with me regardless of who you are or what the bond is." She paused. "But I want to tell you something about them." "Tell me," he said. "I've been carrying them for 21 days, she said. "Long enough to know them the way I know all the dead I carry. Not completely, but in the specific way of someone who has lived alongside them." She looked at the courtyard. They were not afraid of each other at the end. They were together. "That's—" She stopped, found the words. "The ones who die alone carry a specific weight. The ones who die together are different. They had each other." He was very still. "I didn't know that," he said. "I know," she said. "I thought you should." He reached across the step between them, palm up, asking. She put her hand in his. He held it and said nothing, and she let herself receive what came through the contact. His grief, yes, still present, probably always present, but beside it newer and steadier. Something that had been building for 21 days and had arrived tonight at its full shape. She recognized it. She set it beside the feelings she'd been managing for 21 days of her own and understood that management had stopped being the appropriate response. "I'm not going to run again," she said. "After this, I'm done running." He turned to look at her. "I know," he said. "I wasn't going to ask you to stay. I was going to ask you to choose." "There's a difference?" she said. "Staying is what you do when someone makes it necessary," he said. "Choosing is what you do when it's what you want." She looked at him. "I choose," she said. Epilogue. What the Land Remembers. The territory was quieter now. Not silent, it never would be, not for her. The dead were still there, as they had always been and always would be. 7 original Ashenmore voices in the 367 new territories that had arrived with the Convergence Wolves and had not fully left when the Wolves departed. The faint impressions of other lands now threaded into the Ashenmore frequency like additional harmonics. It was, she had decided, the most complex thing she had ever carried. It was also, for reasons she could not have predicted, standing at the boundary stone 2 months ago, the quietest she had ever been. She was in the East Library when Cassian brought her tea. He did this every morning. Not because she couldn't make her own. She had observed this to him once and he had said, "I know you can. That's not why I do it." She had not argued further. He sat across from her with his own cup and looked at the work she'd spread across the table. The convergence documentation she was compiling, the record of what had happened, the specific scholarly contribution that her ability made possible. An account of the convergence as experienced from the inside, the first such account in 3 generations. "The council arbiter wrote again," he said. "I know," she said. "I'll reply today." "They want you to present the documentation at the Northern Summit," he said. "I know," she said again. "Will you go?" he said. She looked up. "We'll go," she said. Something in his expression, the warmth she had spent 21 days pretending not to notice and had spent 2 months not pretending, settled into its permanent form. "We," he said. "You're the alpha who hosted the convergence," she said. "Your testimony is as relevant as mine." "That's the professional argument," he said. "Yes," she said. "Is there another argument?" he said. She looked at him across the library table, and the tea and the documentation, and the 2 months of choosing that had looked, from the outside, like staying but had been, from the inside, something different and more complete. "I've been carrying the dead for 9 years," she said. "I've never had anyone who knew about it and chose to be beside me anyway." She held his gaze. That's the other argument. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he reached across the table, palm up. She put her hand in his. What she received, she had stopped being surprised by how it changed, how it deepened, how the same contact that had once delivered grief and accountability had expanded to contain something larger and less categorizable, was simply him, present, choosing, here. Outside the library window, the Ashenmore territory went on, her dead quiet in their places in her bones, the land holding its long memory, the bond layer warm with the specific frequency of a pack that had received something extraordinary and made room for it. She was not running. She was not managing. She was, for the first time in 9 years, exactly where she had chosen to be. The dead were still there. They always would be. Today, for the first time, their weight felt like something she could share. The end. Thank you for listening to Moonbound Chronicles, What the Dead Remember, a complete werewolf romance audiobook. If this story moved you, subscribe, comment, and share it with someone who deserves a love story that earns its every word. New stories every week on Moonbound Chronicles.